Welcome to Surviving the Mom Years, a video series dedicated to the beautiful chaos we call motherhood, interviewing real moms and talking about real issues. All right, I think we're ready. Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Surviving the Mom Years. My name is Amy, and I'm currently in the process of publishing my first book, and I thought it would be really exciting to do an interview series with some amazing moms that I have the privilege of knowing, to kind of couple with that book and talk about all the ups and downs of being a mom. So the first interview of this entire thing will be with my dear friend Jess, who is incredibly strong, inspirational, and down to earth, and I am so honored that she has agreed to join me, especially because she is 9 months pregnant and living a little bit in limbo as her new house is being built. So I want to thank you for joining us, Jess.
Thank you. And I've got sirens in the background and a fountain in the background and a dog the whole time you were talking, because I'm sitting on a small patio outside because our condo is super tiny and it was somehow quieter out here than it is inside, with my toddler who's not going to want to take a nap, and my dog that paces around and chases the cats, and my husband who always needs something when I'm in the middle of doing something for myself.
So you are quintessential right now, like surviving, in survival mode 100%.
Survival. Every day, it's one day at a time.
And when is the baby due?
January 15th. So I'm 35 in one day.
Ooh, this is the hardest part of the pregnancy, in my opinion. I mean, so this is your second pregnancy. You have a toddler. How is this pregnancy compared to your first pregnancy?
I loved being pregnant the first time. Loved every second of it. Like, down to going into the hospital for induction. I loved every second. I have wanted this child out of me for the last 3 months probably, because the physical pain is so much more than it was with Owen, and the exhaustion on top of having a toddler it's so real. And then last night, I'm like super tired today because last night Kyle of course snored the majority of the night, and usually I can like push him or kick him or pull the blanket a little bit and he'll stop. Last night, no matter what I did, it didn't work, to the point that he had to go out on the couch. But at that point in time, I had already been up for like 3 hours. So,
no.
Yeah, it's fun.
That I will definitely say, because I have a toddler and then I was pregnant as well. And being pregnant the second time while caring for another human being is so much harder. And the sleep deprivation is real. Like, you're already uncomfortable. Everything hurts. Your joints are achy. You add a snoring husband in, and I see the sliding door behind you. You add a snoring husband, and I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But since I know you're on a time crunch, we're just going to get right to it, because my children are going to be home soon, and your child's going to need you soon. So Jess has a kind of extraordinary situation where she had a great first pregnancy with Owen, as she just mentioned. But then when he was little, there were some issues. So can you tell us, first off, what were the warning signs that something wasn't quite right when Owen was little?
Well, Owen had many things that were not quite right from day one. He, the first night in the hospital, I was trying to breastfeed and we thought he was latching, and he spent the whole night crying and not eating, I guess. And so, the next day I hadn't slept for even a second. And I said to the nurses, I was like, I don't know what's wrong. And they actually took him from me, and they're like, you need to sleep. Just even if it's for an hour, please sleep. So I did. And when they came back, they said that he had a lip and a tongue tie. So, so they hurried up and they raced me out of the hospital. Like, my checkout or discharge paperwork was being filled out in the wheelchair as they were pushing me to my car, because it was a Friday and we had to get to the, I guess
The ENT, right? Is that
I
who
was gonna
does
say, I
that?
guess that's an ENT.
Yeah, some places do a pediatric dentist, but I think where we live, the ENT is pretty much the only one who does it.
Yeah, and they closed at 11 o'clock. So they were literally, I was filling out my discharge paperwork on the way to the car in my wheelchair, because then we had to race from Milford to Lewis, which is, you know, like a 25, 30-minute drive, to make sure that we got in on time, or else we were going to spend the whole weekend with him unable to eat. So that was thing one. And then about, probably, he was 2 weeks old and I called the doctor because he never stopped crying. He was the saddest little baby. And I called the nurse and I said, listen, I know that infants cry, but something is wrong with him. Like, this doesn't feel right. So they got us in. They, you know, went to the doctor, and they actually tested his stool and found blood and said something's upsetting his stomach. The most common thing is milk and soy. Cut that out of your diet. So that's what I did. And then that actually improved very quickly. I would say probably in just like a couple of weeks, he was a very different child, and things seemed to be going okay. Then around 6 months, when you introduce solids, you know, just for fun, you introduce solids. We started with oatmeal and rice because those are the things that you start with. Right. And he started having, he was vomiting all the time, and he was getting a rash. And so we stopped giving it to him. And then he got sick and ended up with erythema multiforme, and which is like this very random rash. And they blamed it on amoxicillin that he was taking. Now we're not really sure what happened, but in his chart it says he's allergic to penicillins because the doctor said, we'll trial that when he can say, Mommy, I can't breathe, versus, you know, now.
That's not, but every mom's like, all right, that's the test. When he says you can't breathe, then you know it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, Mommy, I can't breathe. So, I mean, he just seemed to be sensitive to everything. You know, the flu shot made him speckle up, and we couldn't win. Every time we introduced him to anything, there was a problem. So, ultimately, around 9 months, we had been trying everything. You know, I was breastfeeding. We were trying to give him a lot of high-fat foods like avocado. I was making homemade baby food to make sure that it was as thick as possible, and then I could add in like oils and stuff that I knew that he could have. And
yeah, I remember when we first met, you're like, I make the noodles and then I butter the noodles to get as much fat into his diet as possible. Like, you had a whole step process to make everything more high fat content.
And same with toast. You toast a piece of bread and then you put down coconut oil or butter, and then you slather it with peanut butter in order to fatten it up more. That was, you know, a little bit later, but
weight then. So he was at this point like clearly not gaining weight, right?
Not at all. Okay. He started to drop so significantly. I would say probably around month 4 that he was going from like a high percentile to a medium percentile, and then it just progressed lower and lower and lower. So by month 9, he was in like the negative percentiles.
Oh,
yeah. I don't think they ever went below like -1, but I don't know if that's because it didn't exist or what the case was. But he was very, 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 very tiny, and I got very sick, and he cried for like 2 or 3 days, and my husband was like, is he not getting enough to eat? Which, when you're breastfeeding primarily, that is not what you want to hear when you don't feel well and you're the primary nourishment for your child. So I tried to pump and nothing came out. So I called my doctor and I was like, I've been sick. I guess I'm not producing anything. But we knew that Owen couldn't have milk and soy, so he couldn't have regular formula. So I couldn't just run to the store and do anything, get anything for him. And between me not being able to breastfeed, him not being able to eat regular formula, me being very sick, and then just the pattern of him decreasing and decreasing and decreasing, no matter what we were doing to try to put weight on him. And I mean, we were doing everything that we were doing was at the request of our doctor, like it wasn't like I was just flying by the seat of my pants hoping for the best. We were going to the doctor all the time because he also had chronic ear infections. So
okay.
So they ended up sending us to the hospital. So we were admitted in March, a couple years ago now, which seems so crazy. So he was 9 months, and they had to do the whole deal of hooking him up to IVs, and we had to be monitored at AI DuPont while he transitioned to a prescription-based formula. So we were there for about a week, and we had like goals that we had to meet. Like each day he had to eat so much of this formula, and they would discharge us when he was able to have, so many ounces in one day. And that hospitalization was scary because, he's just this little baby, and we have pictures of him, and he's just so tiny in his crib, and he's got, the IVs in his arm,
and you're a first-time mom. Like, this is totally new. And relying on other people's information because, what mom has this in their arsenal to begin with before ever having kids.
Right. And I've never been hospitalized other than to give birth. My husband's never been hospitalized. So, like, not only was this our first hospital experience for the most part in general, but it's this helpless little baby who, can't tell us what's wrong. So that hospitalization was like the team that we had there was actually really great. We did find out that we were informally investigated. His diagnosis was malnourishment. He wasn't even failure to thrive. He was malnourished. And so they called like the doctor and everything. And luckily, I had been going to the doctor. It was all through his chart that we were concerned about his weight, all the different things that we were trying. So the doctor and the nurse, who I became very friendly with, they were very quick to be like, no. This is a mom that she does absolutely everything that she can. She's always checking in with us. This is, they wanted to see if this was an abuse and neglect case. So
I can't even imagine, like, because it's not. Like, for everyone watching this video, I will tell you, Jess is one of the best mothers I know. So the fact I can't, just that added stress, that's just like the cherry on top. And I understand why they have to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's definitely necessary. But when you're already in the thick of it, it's just like one more.
Yeah. So we were ultimately discharged, and he was taking the formula okay. And then we were home for a couple of days at the most, and it was just projectile vomit every single time he ate. And we were just, again, like, what are we doing wrong? And because the amount of guilt that you feel as a mom in general is just through the roof. But I mean, at this point in time, my kid had been sick most of his life between, the weight decrease, the ear infections. He hadn't ever slept. Like, he never slept well.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up at the hospital again.
Ugh.
Another inpatient stay. And
I'm just going to touch on that for a minute. So sleep deprivation, I've recently learned, having twins and having a toddler, that sleep deprivation it's not funny. It's not something that we're like, oh, I only got 2 hours of sleep. It affects you mentally, emotionally. It is a psychological drain. So if you're sleep deprived and the baby's sleep deprived, I just want to drive home the point like that is, it makes the situation hard to nearly impossible in my experience. So
Well,
I
and
don't
my
know.
husband, every time I got behind the wheel of the car, he was nervous because I had to go back to work at, Owen was 3.5 months, I think, when I went back to work. And sleep deprivation was so bad that one day a coworker, he had a couch in his office, and he was like, I'm going to go to lunch and you're going to take a nap on my couch.
Oh, what a good coworker.
And I have the best coworkers. I work at the best office. But yeah, I mean, Kyle was really scared for me every single time I got in the car. It was bad.
Right.
There were a lot of tears from all of us, but so then we ended up at the hospital again, and the first hospitalization was all about nutrition and getting him to switch to the prescription formula, which again, very luckily, my insurance covered that. I learned through support groups later on that not every state or insurance covers prescription formula, and people would pay like hundreds of dollars for a case of it, and I was getting it for free through my insurance. Well, paying for my insurance obviously, but so that was something that we were very quick to be like, at least there's that.
Yeah.
But the second hospitalization, we were part of like the team for oh goodness, like gastro issues, but that's not what it was called. It was all about, why is he vomiting all the time and why is he not gaining weight, kind of thing, from a internal perspective versus a formula changing, what he's eating perspective.
What's wrong with his gut? This was all about like,
Yeah,
what is it, intestines? Is it stomach? What's happening in there?
right. So they did an endoscopy, which was terrifying because that meant he had to have anesthesia. Again, a little tiny 9-month-old baby.
Who's already underweight.
They
That's a big factor too. Putting kids under anesthesia is scary to begin with, but if you have a underweight who's already struggling child, that's a big factor. Yeah.
And then they did X-rays to make sure that there wasn't like blockages and stuff like that. And he ended up with a feeding tube because we couldn't keep anything down. We couldn't figure out what was wrong, and that was horrible because they take them from you to do this procedure of sticking it down and everything, and he's a baby and he pulled it out within minutes. Yes. And he didn't pull it out all the way though, luckily. So they said that it needed to go, there's like 3 different places that a feeding tube can go, like distances, which I'll never remember what any of them are. And his needed to go to the furthest distance. And so when he pulled it, it wasn't at that furthest spot anymore, but it was still inside of him. And they wanted to do another X-ray to make sure that it was at least far enough. And that was kind of when our hospitalization went really downhill, because I understand the need for X-rays. I understand the need for medical procedures, but I asked the student doctor. Is that the attending? No, the attending is the doctor. Who's the student doctor? Resident. I asked the resident doctor why he needed to make sure that it was far enough. Like, what's the worst that could happen if it was at point A rather than point B? Like, is it going to kill him? And he said, well, no, but the best chances of getting all the nutrition. And I was like, but we don't know if it needs to be at point B, and it could be fine at point A. And he was like, well, yeah. I said, so why are we going to put a 9-month-old through another X-ray when he just had an X-ray, yesterday? Like, I don't understand. Well, you know, x-rays are very safe. Well, then why, when I have to hold him down, do I have to wear a metal suit? You know, clearly they're not very, I mean, they're safe to an extent, but this is a small baby that you just exposed. You say that I'm down to earth. That's very sweet of you.
I think you are.
The mama bear came out, and it got to the point where like the nurse, the charge nurse, had to come in because I was yelling and carrying on. You are the only advocate your child has. He can't advocate. He's a baby. He can't advocate for himself. And I didn't feel like they were explaining things well enough to me, and I didn't see the medical necessity. So ultimately, the nurse agreed with me, and the resident walked away with his, you know, tail between his legs. But
you're right. I agree 100%. Like, no one will defend your child like you will, and if something doesn't feel right, I think a lot of people are intimidated by the medical system and they just go with the flow. So you stood up for your kid and you stood up for what was right, and it ended up being the right decision. So
yeah, because he did fine. It was the very first time he ever slept through the night, was the night that he had the feeding tube. And so that was a good indicator that he wasn't sleeping through the night because he wasn't getting enough to eat.
Right.
And he was finally getting enough, and so he slept soundly. But it was during that hospitalization that we realized that I was just never going to be able to breastfeed. So, like, the prescription formula was all that was the best thing for him. And that was a really hard thing for me to come to terms with. And I'm not even really sure why. I don't know if it's because it's pushed on us, you know, like that you're supposed to breastfeed, that that's the best thing for your kid. But it's not, you know, that's what was ultimately not allowing him to grow, was me trying and rather than accepting that something else is better for him. And part of that came from my doctor, part of that came from just society. But so then I had to deal with, I'm never going to breastfeed him again. And I didn't get to have that last time. Like, I mean, there obviously was a last time, but I didn't get to know.
Yeah.
Yes. And so on top of the hospitalization and arguing with the doctors, and, you know, you're sleeping on a plastic couch the whole time you're there. And that was a week-long hospitalization too. I then had to go through all of like the guilt and the stopping of breastfeeding and the hormones that go along with that pretty much immediately. And I mean, it was a roller coaster.
Breastfeeding is not just an easy, like, oh, I'm stopping. Like, you're still going to produce milk. You're going to get engorged. And then, like, you're sitting there trying to squeeze out the milk because you're like, I just need to get a little bit so I can slowly wean. It's not a quick one and done. And, you know, just because I've breastfed my kids, I've used formula my kids, I've done both. So I understand it is so emotional. And if you haven't gone through it, it's really hard to grasp why it is. But I think there's like a brain, and I'm going to butcher explaining this. Like, when we breastfeed, oxytocin is released in our brain, I believe, and other hormones. So when you all that and cut it out, there's like almost a withdrawal period. And like you said, with the mom guilt. So I can't even imagine what that week must have been like for you.
Well, and we ended up leaving with no answers. Ultimately, it was, there's nothing, we just kept being told that there was nothing wrong with him. So we had a nurse there who she was clearly put there for a reason. And she said, listen, a lot of the problems that Owen seems to be having is very similar to a friend of mine's kid. And she was explaining to me that this friend's kid had something called EOE, something to do with the esophagus, and that he was seen by specialists at CHOP. so the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And she was like, I could get in a lot of trouble for telling you this, but don't come back here. Go there and try to get some answers. And so I started doing research on EOE and came across a condition called FPIES, which is a food protein intercolitis something. I probably should have studied this before knowing that we were going to have this conversation.
Back to FPIES. Everyone, just if you want to look this up, just FPIES.
FPIES. Yep.
There you go. And then everyone, we can all Google it afterwards. Don't worry about it.
And everything seemed right. Like all the sensitivities, the vomiting after like the oatmeal. When I say that, like, so the rice only gave him like really bad rashes and made him really uncomfortable. The oatmeal, he projectile vomited over and over and over and over again. And so FPIES is like an allergy, but it's not an IgE allergy like, you know, people are to peanuts and stuff like that. It doesn't cause like breathing issues or hives. It causes issues in the gut, irritation, inflammation, and then either such extreme diarrhea or such extreme vomiting that it can actually put you into shock from, you know,
oh wow,
dehydration and such. So, but then once you have your episode from your, you know, your reaction, you're like perfectly fine, as long as you know, get the fluids and stuff.
But if you keep exposing yourself, it kind of compounds, right? So if you keep getting exposed to the same trigger, it gets worse, would you say, or no?
It did the first couple of times, yes. But after, well, I mean, I don't know how bad it would have gotten because we stopped giving it to him. Okay. So I'm not sure. So we were able to schedule with CHOP, and they have a whole team dedicated to FPIES. And it's one of few in the whole country. So we were, again, very lucky because it's just a couple-hour drive. So, you know, it was a wait to get in, but the team consists of a nutritionist and, oh goodness. It's a team of 3. An allergist.
Okay.
And I guess like a gastroenterologist, maybe.
Let's go. I mean, that sounds like that would make sense to round out the 3 pieces.
Right. And they all meet with you at the same time, and you talk about what's been going on, and that's what they diagnosed him with. So the reason that he hadn't been gaining weight is because I was still eating a lot of things that he couldn't have. I was still eating the rice. I was still eating the oats. And it was affecting him even through my breast milk.
And how old was he when he finally got this diagnosis?
He was probably about a year old because it was a wait to get into CHOP. And by the time we got out of our second hospitalization, he was probably, you know, 10 months. Okay. So yeah, he was probably about a year old. So,
poor guy.
So yeah, I mean, once we had answers, then we knew what direction we could go in. I had to make a lot of foods from scratch. I had to read a lot of labels. Milk, soy, rice, and oats were the 4 things that he couldn't have. The milk and soy, they didn't consider FPIES. They just considered that the MSPI, the milk soy protein intolerance. But the rice and oats was the FPIES trigger. We had to walk around with a letter from them that said, this is how you treat it. So if you got to the hospital, you treat it with Zofran and not an EpiPen. And my life became food labels and recipes and, you know, homemade everything for the most part.
to let the world know this part. So Jess is working full time, making everything from scratch, cooking, and somewhere in here, and I met you after this part of your journey, but your husband was away for a work-related training a lot. So there was a big chunk of time you were on your own doing all of this. So in like supermom mega status. Imagine, I just want everyone to take a minute. Imagine working all day, coming home, taking care of your child, and then when your child goes to bed, you're up cooking all night to make sure your child has enough food for the next day. Is that pretty much sum up your days for?
That was my life.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I do it all again. You know, that's what you do as a parent. And you know, especially when it comes to health and again, that like the guilt, that irrational guilt. Even I know that Renee told you that I started to feel so sad because he wasn't able to eat the things that his friends were eating at school, at daycare. So I was getting their menu so I could make a version of whatever they were having the next day for him so it looked like the other foods. And it sounds so silly, but I remember coming to pick him up one day at daycare, and it was in the middle of lunchtime, and he was all of his friends in the class were at a table together, and he was in a high chair type setup, kind of off to the side, because they were eating something that he couldn't have. And that was how I learned that he pretty much ate like every meal like that, because the daycare didn't want to risk him getting his hands on something. And I cried. I just cried because he was so isolated and excluded, and you know, he didn't really know any different, so I'm sure it didn't bother him at all. But I got back into my car afterwards and just sobbed because I felt like, you know, why can't he be normal, or why can't he be like everybody else?
And you can't fix it. Like there's nothing. It's feeling powerless. You were doing, I think beyond most people, you were doing everything in your power to give him every chance at normalcy, knowing that he had this severe condition, but there are just some things that couldn't be helped, you know.
Right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow for anyone.
I think though that what really turned things around for me was I joined a bunch of support groups. Facebook has a lot of horrible things about it, but it also has a lot of really great things. And I found two separate support groups. One was for the MSPI and one was for FPIES. I might have actually found two that were for MSPI because you know, it's a bunch of parents banding together. Mm-hmm. I found this recipe. I found this product. I found finding something prepackaged that he could have that made my life a little bit easier was like amazing. So there would be those type of recommendations, and just having that community and support, and knowing that you weren't alone. And then this sounds really bad to say, but Owen only had a couple of triggers for FPIES. There were some children who only had a couple of things that they could eat. So it really put into perspective that, yes, he has this, and I'm losing my mind trying to keep track of everything and making sure that I'm doing things the right way. But there were some children who were older than he was and had even more triggers. And I mean, some kids were 4 or 5, and the only thing that they could have still was the prescription formula that they were on because they couldn't find any safe foods for them. Oh, so, you know, it helped put things in perspective as well. I mean, it sounds bad because, you know, somebody else's suffering is greater than yours, and that makes you like feel better about your situation.
That's human nature. But I mean, that's human nature to find solace in knowing you're not alone and that it could be worse. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that's just how we operate as moms and humans. Ooh.
And we were told by the team at CHOP that most kids grow out of it around 18 months to 2 years. And around the 2-year mark, we started trialing. You like go through like a pyramid almost of like, you know, so you find something that has like a rice flour in it, and then you give that to them. And if he can have that for, if he does okay with that, then you can do rice. You know, like you like work your way up to the main ingredient.
Slow intervals, because I don't think I talk about this in my book, but my kids have severe allergies as well to peanuts and eggs. So we will be starting that once they hit the 1 year mark. They say like we're going to start incrementally adding. So
Right.
I'm about to start that journey that you've already completed. Oh, I'm not ready.
And it's scary because you don't know, even just the smallest amount can cause a reaction. So you're like sitting there staring and waiting, and luckily when we started doing the exposures, you know, you start with one product at a time. You know, I want to say that we started with soy maybe, and then rice, and then oats, and then milk. So Owen's 2.5 tomorrow, and he has been finally using like regular milk in his cereal for a couple of months.
Yay.
So he'll drink a few sips of milk, and it doesn't seem to be causing a problem.
Good.
So I feel like his journey is over. I learned that the reason he wasn't sleeping was because of the FPIES diagnosis. And so the first 2 years of his life, he did not sleep. And then even removing everything that we knew was a trigger, there probably was something that was still bothering him a little bit, but not causing the very noticeable reaction. So maybe his tummy hurt frequently. He did not sleep through the night until he was 2. And that was when he stopped showing signs of, you know, the sensitivities. Okay. So it was all linked. Everything, all of the problems that we had, even the ear infections, were linked somehow. I don't remember how, but they said that most kids with allergies and sensitivities have ear infections.
That's what happened. My son, we didn't realize how severe his gluten allergy was until the ear infection started. Once we cut out the gluten, the ear infection stopped. So I definitely—
That's crazy.
Everything is intertwined. And when I'm not a medical professional, when they're little, I feel like everything is compounded and everything is so overlapped. Like one thing causes 10 things to go wrong, you know? So if you could give one piece of advice to other moms who are facing medical uncertainties, who they don't know what's going on, but they know something's wrong, what would your advice be to other moms?
Don't be afraid to speak up. I mean, literally, week 2, I was calling the nurse saying, I get it, babies cry, something is wrong with my child. And they took me seriously because I wasn't going to let it go. And you are the greatest advocate. You are probably the only advocate. And I think that there's always this like mother intuition, you know, like when you first have a kid, you can tell the difference in their cries, you know? So, so go with your gut, and then find your support system. You know, obviously I have friends and I have family that were very supportive, but finding the support groups with people who are in my same situation, I can't even express the amount of just relief I felt when I was reading some other stories and just knowing that I wasn't alone.
Right. That's excellent advice. And because, you know, it took you a year for that diagnosis, and hopefully maybe someone will see this video and be like, wait a minute, my kid has the exact same symptoms and I've never heard of FPIES. You know, and that is there are many purposes to these interviews, but definitely getting the word out there about issues that kids face is part of it. So Owen is doing great now. Now, what are the odds of baby 2 having something similar now that you're about to give birth to your second? And by the way, Jess has not told anyone if it's a boy or girl. So I
I don't know.
she doesn't know. It's a surprise. She lives on the edge like that. So I'm just gonna refer to baby two as baby two because I don't know if it's a he or she. So what's
Um,
the
so very likely.
okay. But you're ready
If
now. It's in your, you know, you've got it in your bag of what to do if something happens.
yes,
Do you
I
think you're going to
feel
try feeding or do you think you're going to go straight to the formula to be safe?
I'm going to attempt to breastfeed. I and maybe that will change, between now and the time that it starts. That was a really difficult thing for me. It's really hard not to blame yourself when you're the only one responsible for feeding him, or or whatever this child is going to be. So after I stopped breastfeeding Owen, I said, I'm never doing that again. I'm not putting that pressure on myself, da 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 da. And then I was reading articles recently that says that every breastfeeding journey is different, and, and that maybe you produced an abundance the first time and have a hard time the second time. Maybe it was a hard go the first time and an abundance the second time. Maybe it's the same. I mean, there's no way to know. Your body reacts so differently to every pregnancy, as I am figuring out already. So I think I'm going to start that way, but I'm not going to, if baby's not growing or if baby's having problems, I'm not going to feel so, I'm not going to feel the pressure to keep trying. I'll know it's okay to either supplement with formula or it's okay to switch to formula completely. What's important is that my baby's fed.
I 100% agree with you. 100%. Every situation is different, and we just need grace. So a big theme in my life with the twins and the toddler is give myself grace. Then my boys have had a little bit of everything. I've done everything, and it's just you have to give yourself grace and do what's right for your child and get out of your own head. And hopefully, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours this past Thursday, and she just gave birth to her second. And she said this time around was completely better than the first time. She said the first time was horrible and the second was fantastic. So, I wish you all the best, but know that whatever you decide, you definitely have my support. And I know we're in a little group of friends. I know all of our friends are going to support you in that because you're just such a badass mom. You're killing it on the mom front. So whatever you decide is the right call. So we're actually coming to the end of this interview, and I've got my list of questions since it's my first interview. What is your favorite mom product right now? Is there something that is making your life easier?
Pertaining to my pregnancy right now, I have a belly band that I've been using that has been very helpful in while I'm up and moving, providing support, and I feel a little bit better since using it. At night, my snoogle. I live and breathe for my snoogle. I don't get a lot of sleep, but the sleep that I do get is because of that. And then pertaining to Owen, is his clock. I bought him a clock that it's from 7 o'clock at night until 6:30 in the morning. There's a moon icon on it. And from 6:30 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, there's a sun icon on it. Even when he started sleeping through the night, he was waking up very early. And he'd want to get out of his crib. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want to feel stuck in my bed if I, was a child waking up either.
Even
but
in the morning, right? Like he's an early riser.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 5 a.m. Hey mom, let's go play.
Yes. So you can set the times for the moon and the sun. So in the beginning, the sun was coming out at 6. Now it's coming out at 6:30. Somehow it has trained him to sleep in a little bit more. Now it's more like he's waking up between 5:45 and 6:15 than 5 and 5:30. But he knows that he's not getting out of bed until the sun comes out. So if he wakes up at 5:45, he lays in his crib. We let him sleep with a toy or an animal or something every night. So he'll lay there content and he'll play. And I don't know if he's like staring at it with one eye the whole time, because at 6:30 on the dot, he's screaming, the sun's out. It's time to get up. It's time to get up. And
I'm going to be asking for you at the end of this, if you can shoot me the links to those, because I personally need to buy one for my daughter. So I may be asking.
I'm telling you.
Are these Amazon purchases?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And they say, you know, the goal is he's still in his crib. So once he's in a bed, you know, the goal is that he'll continue to take it. He takes it very seriously. So the hope is that he'll continue to take it seriously. And even if he doesn't stay in his bed, he'll know that he has to stay in his room, because I'm generally not sleeping. I wake up when he wakes up because I'm a light sleeper and I hear him, but just not having to race out of bed to get to him, and not waking up to him like crying to get out of bed. Like, he knows that he has to wait, and he waits. Which it did not happen that way right away. It was a great process.
So of all my 3 kids, none of them are really great. Jimmy's like okay sleeping, but Chris, the minute he is up, he is screaming at the top of his lungs. So I will be making that investment after this call, because we've talked about it before, but every time you talk about it, I'm like, oh, it sounds so beautiful. It just sounds so nice. Wonderful. All right, and then our final question, to sum it up, what is the one thing you are grateful for today?
The weather. Being able to sit outside to do this, I don't know, I can't really even see myself in the little screen because of the way the sun's hitting me, but we have been cooped up in this apartment so much, and we're actually awaiting COVID results right now. We got tested last night, so we're trying to, you know, you don't want to be out and about if you can't, if you're waiting on results from a COVID test.
We're waiting too. I checked right before this call for our COVID results as well, so I hear you.
So just to be able to sit out here, I've got short sleeves on, the sun's shining down on me, like, I didn't have to put Owen to bed, like, so really I think what I'm grateful for is you, because you're the reason I'm sitting out here.
Well, I am incredibly grateful for you as well. This interview was amazing. You are such just an inspirational woman in my life. Like, you're an inspirational mom, you're an inspirational woman. I feel like just meeting you has grounded me a certain amount. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I truly am thankful for that.
Thank you.